Straightforward conversations, no filters, beyond the headlines, just the facts. This is the Newsmaker. Thank you for joining Newswatch Plus. I'm Lois, Calderon. The Philippine Sovereign Wealth Fund has finally made its very first investment, a stake in the major shareholder behind the only grid operator in the country, the National Grid Corporation of the Philippines. The Maharlika Investment Fund has put its money where its mouth is. Today's Newsmaker, Maharlika Investment Corporation CEO and President Rafael Jr. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Consing.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for inviting me.
Sir, this has been 1 year in the making. Back in late 2023, when you took the helm of the Maharlika Fund, you had said that energy security is one of your investment themes. After all that due diligence, regulatory approvals, it's a done deal. This now sets the tone for all the other investments you've drawn up. Now, when you look at your investment plans, you are on target, aren't you?
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. The first year really was about building the organization. It was basically about writing the frameworks, putting together the risk management and investment frameworks to ensure that when we invest, it's within our plans, within our targets. And now that we've been able to hire a team, we've now begun deploying our capital.
Okay, now let's establish the baseline first, because there have been some confusing reports that the deal covers a direct stake in the National Grid Corporation, or NGCP, but that's not the case, right? The deal was a 20% stake through a group that controls the majority of NGCP, which is the Henry C. and Cayuta Group, through Synergy Grid and Development Corporation, which is a listed company. And then Synergy, in turn, owns 60% of NGCP through its subsidiaries, the Monte de Oro Grid and Calaca. And your corporation does not have direct stakes still in NGCP. Can you give us now the ownership structure now?
Sure. So just to clarify, we did obtain 20% of SGP, and this is in the form of preferred shares. And these preferred shares are convertible to common shares in 3 years at a strike price of $22.50. Basically, SGP itself has effective control over 40.2% of NGCP. Okay, thus the ownership of NGCP remains at 60% controlled by Filipinos from a voting perspective, 40% owned by State Grid of China, and there are also some preferred shares issued by NGCP to SGP in the past, but these are non-voting preferred shares. So if you were to look at the strictest sense of the word in terms of ownership, the real ownership of State Grid of China today is down to about 34 or 35%, if I remember correctly.
Okay, I'll get to the preferred shares part and also the ownership of China. But now the deal gives some board seats for Maharlika Corporation. Now, it's a 7-man board for Synergy. That's the original structure. But with Maharlika's entry, the board has expanded to 9 seats. How did that happen? Is it because of the increase in authorized capital stock or the sale of unissued shares? The agreement entails, as you said, MIC subscribing to newly issued convertible preferred shares.
Yes, thank you for that. So they will be issuing new shares. They will be applying for an increase in their authorized capital, and then following which they will issue those to us. So hence, all these funds will then be going directly to the company that could then support their CapEx rollout.
Okay, because of course the energy sector is a capital-intensive sector, and with that increase in authorized capital stock, you'll have the shares will be diluted, and that's why you now have the new corporate or ownership structure. Now we go to the preferred shares part. Preferred shares have no voting rights, and you said these are convertible to common shares that will give Maharlika Group voting rights 3 years down the road.
Okay. No, in fact, let me clarify that further. In fact, there are certain unique characteristics of these preferred shares. So you're absolutely spot on. If you look at traditional or standard structures of preferred shares, they have fixed dividends, which this will have for about 6.5%.
Yeah, which is good. Yeah.
Yes, and there's no voting rights, no. But
Yes.
this one, however, has voting rights. So therefore, we obtain that voting right on day one. So when we close this 90 days from the time that we signed the binding term sheet, we will be able to obtain our voting rights upon payment of the proceeds.
Wow, that sweetens the deal then, Mr. Kansing, because, well, traditionally, you're right, preferred shares, no voting rights, but that gives you first dibs on dividends. So that sweetened the deal then, having a voting rights. Now, that gives you, or the Maharlika Investment Corporation, 2 seats in the board of the SGP, or the Synergy Grid. What about the counterpart, the grid itself, the NGCP? And would those 2 seats be enough to give you voice or power, enough to move the needle?
Yes, in my opinion, yes. If you look at it, we're starting from 0. So therefore, having 2 board seats each at the level of SGP and NGCP gives us the ability to, well, A gives us visibility. Second, this gives us voice, which otherwise would not have been there if this investment were not to be made. And we believe that that is a very big achievement insofar as the Filipinos are concerned. Apart from that, we would also be able to participate in dividends by way of guaranteed yields. So we're protected for the first 3 years, regardless of the dividend yield they decide to pay on common shares. We will be at 6.5%. And then following which, after we believe after about 3 years, then we can expect hopefully their dividends to be able to rise beyond 6.5%, and by which time we would then have converted to common shares.
Equity, which would give them higher dividends. Now, sir,
yes. If I may add, I think that one equally important aspect is when the shares convert in 3 years, because of the premium, the number of shares that we will be converting from preferred to common, in fact, reduces. Sure. We're starting off with about 1.3 billion preferreds, but when we convert, it's only going to convert to about 830, if my memory serves. So our ownership, therefore, comes down. The economic ownership, therefore, reduces as a result of the conversion. That said, we will be able to retain our voting rights equal to what has originally been contemplated at 20%. So even if on a common share basis, our ownership reduces to 14.2 following the conversion, we will nonetheless still retain 2 board seats out of 9. Okay. And same goes with NGCP.
2 seats out of 9 and 2 in the NGCP, which is consists of how many board seats, sir? 15, is that right?
Out of 15. 15. Out of 15, okay, that's so correct.
Effectively, you are outnumbered, but still is better than having 0.
Yeah, well, the intention anyway was not to undertake any takeover. That was really never the intention, nor would it ever be. I personally believe that this asset requires...
Mr. Kansing? Okay, we're fixing the line. Can you hear us, Mr. Kansing?
I can hear you very well. Highly capital-intensive company, and therefore, I think it should best remain in private sector hands, provided we have some visibility from a government perspective beyond our regulatory role.
Okay. Now, it's a good deal apparently when you look at preferred shares having voting rights. But what about the market price? Market price at that time, if you look at the market price, it was before the deal was 11 pesos and 56 pesos per share. My understanding is that the Maharlika agreed to subscribe to the convertible preferred shares at 15 pesos per share. Is that
That's
still
right.
a good deal?
That's right. Yes, yes, it is. We think so. It's 1.3 billion shares. You will not be able to buy that from the market. With the best will in the world, there's only the total outstanding shares of SGP is about 5.268866 billion shares. If you want to acquire 20% of that, you will never be able to acquire it from the market because that's the entire public float. So therefore, premium needed to be paid in order to be able to achieve that much shares. What we did was we calculated this, apart from our valuation metrics, obviously, we priced this by looking at the premium over VWAP. If memory serves, it's about 20% over the weighted average, 30-day weighted average from the time we priced it.
Sure, and when you talk of valuation, of course, and SGP shares, a listed company, of course, is cheaper compared to its peers when you talk of price-earnings ratio, at 14% of its peers, and then this one is about 6.5%. Is that right, Mr. Consul?
Well, okay, so that's a good point. Now, as an investor, we don't look at it from a PE or a multiple perspective. No, so hence you're right. If we were just buying the stock and we plan to trade it, you're right. We would look at PE. We would look at the multiple of EBITDA, which at our price
and that
is
to equity
roughly
ratios probably.
Yeah, and no, if you're lending, then you look at your debt equity at Alna. But your PE, for example, you're right, because we're coming in at, if I'm not mistaken, something like a little over 8 times earnings, and I believe something like 5-6 times EBITDA multiple. Now, so yeah, yes, it's cheap, particularly compared to its global peers. It's also trading at about 25 to 30% discount to its book value. If you look at about 20 listed transmission company stocks around the world, there are only 3 companies that are in fact trading significantly below their book values. SGP is first. The Bangladeshi transmission company is second. And the Russian transmission company is the third. The rest of the transmission companies around the world are in fact trading at a premium over book, and we're buying it at a steep discount. But more importantly is more than that, because we'll only look at that because as a stock market investor, you may want to cash out at some point in time, right? But in our case, we're going to be a long-term investor. So what we look at basically is the return on your capital arising from the dividends that it'll pay over time.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, and that is giving us in my opinion, a healthy and very robust return beyond PE.
You have a good investment manager there at the Maharlika Investment Corporation. Of course, you yourself being a capital market expert before you joined the government. Now, Mr. Consing, I know in your first few appearances since your appointment in 2023, you had these 4 investment pillars, including agroforestry, industrial estates, and energy security. You've given a rundown of all the reasons why you chose NGCP, market-wise dividends, valuation. Now, the timing, though, it happens now, just when you have those blackouts and ahead of summer when we expect an increase in demand. A year ago, when you were having this negotiation, the idea was that to have a stake in NGCP so that we address the energy security of the country. So can you explain the timing then?
I didn't understand your question so much because it is a bit covered, but I'll try to respond to it. Please let me know if I'm in the right direction. So from our perspective, if you're talking about our impact, for example, of the expansion of NGCP to electricity prices and over time, and over what period of time, so obviously it's extremely important to note that NGCP's contribution to our electricity bill is only about 3.1%. Generation contributes a little over 50%. Distribution, i.e., Morocco, contributes another 18 to 20% to the electricity bill. Where it would be advantageous for consumers is when NGCP is able to fulfill its rollout obligations and be able to connect significantly more areas. It has been able to already, in fact, connect quite a large part of the country. There are, however, areas that still require expansion, and when that happens, then you will have for more generation companies to, in fact, build their facilities and get on the grid. That will reduce the price of electricity over time. So the timing as to when this will happen is a function of where the rollout is going to occur. So like before, for example, when they finished the connection between Visayas and Mindanao, the impact to electricity was immediate because there was excess in Mindanao that could now be sold to Visayas. So again, we will, NGCP and the DOE would have to work together in finding out where those areas are and basically pursue those rollouts. That's basically the plan.
Okay, when you announced this deal last week, you mentioned about threats to energy security. This would address threats to energy security. In what form does that threat? What shape does it take? Because I'm wondering, of course, NGCP, 40% of NGCP is owned by the state-owned China-owned State Grid Corporation of China.
Sure. No, so when I refer to energy security, I'm speaking really about having electricity for everyone. Because ensuring that you've got electricity, power precedes progress. The Department of Energy had done a study before as to the effects of electrification, particularly in the rural areas, where it said that if you give a poor person electricity from 0 to 8 hours, it raises their income by about 15%. If you raise it from 8 to 16, it rises to about a third. And if you raise it to 24 hours, it rises by 50%. So power precedes progress. And we believe that that's really part of the plan, i.e., when we roll out these, help NGCP roll out these lines and be able to provide electricity and achieve the government's vision and dream of 100% electrification, it in fact secures our security as a whole because it promotes progress. It ensures that everyone will gain access to electricity and better lives. That will hopefully maintain peace and order in the nation. So hence, it's quite important that we are able to secure our energy security. So it's not about fear from any external issues. No, not at all. It's not an issue. At least from where Maharlika stands, we don't look at energy security from the perspective of defending it, for example, against a foreign threat. No, that is not what we contemplated.
Okay, that's not the reference that you made when you talk of external threats. But have you met, Mr. Consing, the Chinese investors?
No, we have not. Hopefully, we will when we finally sit on the board, and we hope to be able to establish a proper dialogue with them, proper partnership, because we will now be partners in NGCP, so we will have to work together with them.
And if in case this will happen here in Manila or in Beijing?
I don't know. We've not even thought about our immediate next steps and how we will handle that. But we're just preparing basically to conclude the investment. We're also preparing basically for when we finally take over those seats on the board. We look forward to working with management, basically.
That brings me now to my last question, Mr. Consing. This deal involves almost 20 billion pesos of your war chest. We're talking of 125 billion pesos. What's the next investment?
Well, at the moment, we only have 75 billion pesos. So everybody is aware that 125 billion is the, eventually that will be our seed capital, but at the moment, we really only have about 75 billion. And what we've also done is during the first year, and even up to now, to ensure that we continue to support Land Bank and BPP, we have in fact left our funds there while we have not deployed it. So as not to strain their liquidity positions immediately. Because you're absolutely right, it is quite chunky, it is quite a significant amount for them. The next investment would be most likely in the three other important sectors from our perspective. It would be mining. We will look at mining very closely. Mining, if you look at mining, it's interesting that we call ourselves the fifth mineralized country in the world, and yet the contribution of mining to GDP is only 0.5%. When you compare ourselves to the likes of Australia, Canada, and Indonesia, we're a fraction of what contribute to the nation. And we intend to lead, enable, and catalyze that sector. The other one would be healthcare. Hopefully, we can find the right platform for healthcare. Very keen as well in looking at broadband and connectivity, i.e. data center, telecom infrastructure. So these are the areas where hopefully we should be able to make announcements at some point.
Well, capital intensive, most of those investment spaces, and also, greenfield. Thank you, Maharlika Investment Corporation CEO and President Rafael Consing Jr.
Thank you again for inviting me.
We will continue to deliver just the facts and the news you need. Until our next Newsmaker, I'm Lois Calderon.